Yo, what's good YouTube? It's boardzy, and this is going to be my full review of the Scyrox V8, a mouse that has really taken the market by storm. It's not quite a budget mouse, but it is budget for what it's offering, being a 40 gram 8K 3950, essentially an X2H mini clone. So it definitely is in the market that competes with mice like the Sora V2, and it really outclasses a lot of mice, I'm not gonna lie, coming in at $70, 80 shipped. And yeah, if you've watched my reviews on these Chinese mice for a while, you know I'm very critical of them, but when one is done right, I'm willing to give credit where it's due. But I will say, there are two flaws. Like, out of everything there is on a mouse, this really gets everything right aside from two things. One of them, if you watch my initial impressions video, you know the click quality, just the wobble and the looseness in general on this yellow unit is definitely a minor concern I had. It's nothing that was a deal breaker in game, but I also kind of forgot at the time that I got an additional unit sent out to me by the company, and the wobble is much more minimal on this one. I did use it less, but my yellow one out of the box came a little bit wonky. But yeah, really in the week plus I was using it, it didn't seem to get much worse, but it does seem like a defect. And if I had to guess what it was caused by, a lot of these ultra lightweight mice, they're just using very thin like plastic for the actual click structures, and I feel like that just leads to some more variance. But on both units, the actual click feeling itself of the Omron opticals is very nice. They feel like a traditional Switch. They're pretty fast, bouncy, light, so the amount of like pre-travel that's there, it really just assists with the lightness of the click. So all around the click experience is good. Maybe if you want the yellow unit, I know they're sold out, so the second batch might address the click structure issues. And the other issue on this mouse is the battery life, which is dismal. Like, this thing just tears through battery life on 2,000 and 4,000 hertz. I didn't even test it on 8,000, but I genuinely think it would like start blinking within a day of use if it starts on 100. I am using it on game mode and long distance mode. I don't even know what game mode does, but if you give me an option that says it's better performance, I'm going to use it. So yeah, both of these things do combine to drain the battery life more than if you just use it like out of the box on stock settings. But the wireless on this mouse also feels really good, so I feel like that's enhanced. But you know, battery life, it's just, you got to weigh things up against each other, and if you want the best performance, the battery life's going to suffer. But it does seem exceptionally fast draining compared to some other 3950 implementations I've tried. And yeah, once again, it will depend on your settings, your preferences. If you're a 1000 hertz truther, God bless. But yeah, you're not going to use this and be like, wow, this has really good battery life. But yeah, beyond what I just mentioned, there's really not much else negative to say about this mouse. And obviously the most direct comparison is the Pulsar X2H Mini. The standard size X2H, like, you can just feel these mice in hand and it feels way bigger. Obviously the weight is another thing. Both of these mice come in at the low 50 gram range, whereas the Scyrox V8 is listed at 36 grams, but that's with no skates installed. With the stock skates, mine came in at 40, and with these dot skates, which are actually from Artisan, it came in at 39. And yeah, my stance on lightweight mice has never been like the absolute lightest is the best, but when you have the same or a very similar shape and there's a big discrepancy in like the density, and this just feels much less dense in motion than the X2H Mini does, I just have to say that it feels better. Like, there's no issue with the weight balancing either. And the build quality, you can feel like these new Pulsar mice, especially the X2H V2, like, this genuinely feels like a tank. Like, GPX1, almost like Zowie levels of build quality integrity, and you don't get the same level of that on the Scyrox V8, but from just like standard amounts of pressure, it just feels very well built, well constructed. Like, if I do squeeze a lot, I can just feel like a slight flex, but it's just nothing concerning. I think I mentioned that in my initial impressions. But yeah, honestly, with the build quality, there's no issues with like creaking, rattling, anything with the design that makes me feel like it'll worsen long term. But compared to Pulsar, it's definitely just slightly inferior, but that does come at a 10+ gram difference in the weight. And another thing to compare quality wise is the clicks. Like I mentioned, there are some slight issues with the Scyrox just in terms of like wobble and looseness. That Pulsar, it's definitely more refined, like tuned up, but Pulsar in the past definitely had their fair share of issues with clicks. I couldn't really put my finger on why these felt somewhat weird, but it's just like one of the lowest travel distance clicks I've ever seen on these new Pulsar mice. It's kind of like a low profile mouse switch. So they don't have like a very bouncy feel, but they're very fast and very spammable. They just don't travel a lot. I know this isn't a Pulsar mouse review, but yeah, with these Omron opticals, you do get a bit bouncier, lighter, more post travel, more total travel distance, and it's just a very good click implementation in game, in my opinion. There's no absence of tactility, no mushiness. Like if they just tighten up the side to side wobble a little bit, it would be like a 10 out of 10 click implementation. And yeah, now next thing to talk about is the shape, and as I've mentioned many times, this is heavily inspired by the Pulsar X2H Mini, so I won't continue those comparisons, but it's just that type of a mouse. It wouldn't win the most creative, most innovative design reward. As you can see, it's very low towards the front with a high aggressive back hump, but it is a slightly elongated version of the X2H Mini. So honestly, for me with larger hands, it makes it a little bit more accommodating. You can see it's not as wide of a mouse as the Ninjutsu Sora V2. And the Scyrox V8 also just has a higher hump towards the back of your hand. It kind of is not similar, but it's similar in essence to the Zowie U2, where it has a thin grip width and then it kind of stays narrow towards the top of the mouse. So yeah, I'm obviously not saying this is a clone of the Zowie U2. The curvature is way more intense on that mouse, but you can just feel like hints of difference from the X2H Mini, because that seems to just have flatter sides and not as much of an actual like flare and kind of recession for your thumb, if you can actually notice that on the Scyrox V8. So for my hands, it's just a bit better of a shape. The main two grip styles, I've been using a claw grip like this, where I have very easy access to the side buttons, which are also well tensioned, really no issues to complain about for using them in Fortnite. And I can also like even pull off a fingertip kind of relaxed. It's really by no means too small, and it's a mouse where I have a lot of freedom for finger placement, and I feel like I can genuinely play my best on it. It's got a narrow grip width, but everything is like, it's a small to medium sized mouse, but it's not too small. You can look at it next to the Viper Mini Signature, which is definitely a mouse that I feel like is on the edge of being too small, and this is just, it's a safer shape than that for me personally. Obviously, if you have smaller hands, things might be different, and the Scyrox V8 might be a bit more accommodating for relaxed grip styles. And yeah, with the shape, it's really simple. If you enjoyed the X2H Mini, you're going to like the Scyrox V8. Even if you enjoyed the Sora V2, just any of these small back hump focused claw grip mice, this is a safe recommendation, and it's easily my top recommendation, price considered. I think it's a lot more accommodating for claw grip than something like the Final Mouse ULX Small, the Arbiter Akitsu. And yeah, a few other mice I would consider competition are the VXE Mat R and just like the ATK F1. I don't have one at the moment, but I believe they made a new one, the Extreme, so I'll try to get my hands on that. But the difference between the V8 and the Mat R, I just feel like the V8 was made by a more competent team of people like who know how to design a mouse when I use it. Could that just come down to like the shape difference and like just how basic and safe I find the Mat R to be? Maybe, but I would definitely recommend the V8. And yeah, the way I see it, the V8 is the best like budget high performance mouse on the market. You can compare it to something like the Maya X, which is $120 and includes an 8K dongle. Obviously, like Razer, Logitech flagship mice, those are $160. Even Pulsar, the X2H, this V3 version costs $100, and then you have to buy an additional dongle, whereas this is $80 with the 8K dongle. So, like, the value, there's really not even an argument to be had. I guess the warranty is probably going to be less reliable than some of these, like, higher tier companies, but still, like, this mouse, it just holds up, and all of the other aspects, like the side buttons, the scroll wheel, it gets those right. The stock skates, mine were like melted to the adhesive sheet. It was really no good, but even so, like, you guys can get a lifetime supply of skates for like $1 on AliExpress. The wheel, they actually note it's a custom encoder, and I can confirm when I tore down my white unit, it was an encoder that said Scyrox on it. It really feels like a TTC Gold though. The wheel, like the click is very light. It's just a passable wheel. It was fine for scroll wheel reset. And yeah, I definitely would not call this like a rigid or a notchy wheel. I'll actually do a sound test of everything. So yeah, the steps are very light, but you can definitely feel each individual one, and the texture, it's like a nice rubber texture. So really, Squirrel Wheel gets a pass. Another thing they get right is the sensor positioning. You can see it's actually beyond centered. It's a little bit forward placed. And yeah, it's definitely not as forward placed as something like the G-Wolf's HTS2, but I've always said I like when the sensor lines up with my thumb. In this case, that happens, and the wireless, like I said, just feels really good on this mouse. I think enabling in the software the settings that push the sensor like to its limits and increase power consumption factor in, but really this holds up with pretty much any wireless implementation I've ever felt. And one factor that I noticed when comparing a lot of wireless mice is some just have a clearer, smoother mouse input feeling, and Scyrox definitely is on the good end of the spectrum when it comes to blocking out like other signal noise, because this implementation just feels exceptional. I was also raving about the Maya X's implementation. There are of course rumors that Scyrox is a sub-brand of Lamzu, so maybe they have the same like firmware engineers. But whatever is the case, the wireless felt very good on this, holds up to any like $120 plus mouse out there. Even though I did see notably Stubby FPS saying that he was having some issues, I did notice in that post that he did have his cat, like a literal animal, blocking the dongle from the mouse's signal, so maybe that was an issue, but I saw other people complaining. So yeah, I really hope that there aren't any issues with the sensor, and if there are, I hope they're easily patchable with a firmware update. But across both of my copies, I didn't have so much as a wireless stutter. Like, it was just a really good experience on 2 and 4,000 hertz polling rate, of course, except for the battery. And yeah, as for the software, there is a web driver, so tech-wise, like, really, what more can you ask for from this mouse, especially at the price it's at? And here you can see the battery is beginning to blink. It's gone down over 5% since I started making this video. But yeah, in conclusion, with all of these factors being considered, I just realized I forgot to talk about the coating. It's a pretty standard rubberized coating. It feels like this white unit is a bit less dry than this white one, which I've put a bit less time on, so I don't know if over the course of the months it will be a bit more slippery, but as of now it's just a very like grippy rubberized top tier coating. So it gets a pass there as well, but as I was saying, this mouse is going to get the seal of approval. And yeah, really what more needs to be said? The mouse kind of speaks for itself. Sub 40 grams, well implemented 3950, and it's below $100, well below $100, with a high polling rate dongle included. Yes, you're gonna have to charge it a lot, so maybe wait a batch for the issues that I mentioned to be addressed, but like even so, in its current state, this is a top tier mouse, and a lot of these budget mice, I'm not gonna lie, they're products that I just wouldn't use, so I don't like recommending them. But this, it's better than some of these products that I would like use and recommend. So I don't know. Scyrox is very impressive. I'm interested in their future releases, but from me, my testing, this gets a pass, a very high score. So like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you have any other questions, want to let me know how your copy is, feel free in the comments below. But yeah, that's going to be all. Peace out.